Hi, I'm Hal Roberts. This is Bridge City News. Here's some of the top stories we've been following. The Alberta government announces more funding help for continuing care for our seniors. Alberta Premier Jason Kenney is receiving backlash over not opening more of our economy. Reporter Brian Lilly has the details. And Manitoba will be easing more restrictions on Friday. We will explain how that will impact business owners.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. Lethbridge police have charged 37-year-old Melissa Dumaine Whitegrass of Lethbridge with first-degree murder in connection with a fatal pedestrian vehicle collision from June of last year. BCN's AINSLEY O'Reilly is at the LPS and has the latest.
Well, Hal, Whitegrass has been charged with first-degree murder, dangerous driving causing death, and assault with a weapon. She's been remanded and scheduled to appear in court on March 9th. Now, during their investigation, LPS uncovered that Whitegrass and Forsyth were in a common-law relationship until 2017. The death has been deemed domestic violence, although LPS has no previous reports of domestic violence between the two of them.
Certainly our investigators deemed that this was, in fact, a domestic violence situation, but the actual motive for why the accused did what she did on that day is not clear at this time. Certainly there were some triggers at the time of the occurrence that were not, for lack of a better term, routine observations by the responding officers. For example, the vehicle fleeing the scene. Why did the vehicle flee the scene? Obviously, the accused actually stayed at the scene of the collision. She did not flee. She was found at the scene of the collision, and it did indicate to the responding officers that the collision was accidental in nature. But certainly our investigation and further follow-up has led us to believe that this was in fact not accidental and that it was an intentional act.
The Alberta government announced more funding for specialized care for seniors. Premier Jason Kenney announced a $200 million funding boost to continuing care for seniors for a total of $3.5 billion. He made the announcement Wednesday morning at the Aged Care Seton Retirement Home in Calgary.
We have allocated over $500 million to upgrade existing and to create new continuing care capacity in Alberta for seniors over the next 3 years. That's an historic investment in building new facilities like this and helping to modernize some of the older continuing care and other seniors congregate facilities.
The recent Alberta budget showed a historic $23 billion invested in healthcare, which is a $900 million increase. There was also $1.5 billion in contingency funding in the battle against COVID-19. The province announced that there were 402 new cases of COVID-19 identified over the past 24 hours. There are currently 251 people in hospital with the virus, including 48 in intensive care. There are 4,649 active coronavirus cases in the province. Sadly, there are also 12 more deaths attributed to the virus. Here in the South Zone, there are 331 active cases, including 218 in Lethbridge and 20 in Medicine Hat. Alberta's Chief Medical Officer of Health, Dr. Dina Hinshaw, says the province has identified its first variant case outbreak at a continuing care facility.
This outbreak was identified late on Friday at Churchill Manor in Edmonton with a single case. Since then, 27 staff and residents have tested positive. This includes 19 cases which have been confirmed as positive for the variant.
As for Albertans who've now recovered from COVID-19, that number has now climbed to almost 128,000. Alberta's health minister says our province may follow British Columbia in extending the time between COVID-19 vaccine doses. Tyler Shandro says a committee of COVID-19 experts is analyzing the information and a decision is coming soon. The BC government says it will extend the wait between the first and second doses to 4 months to get more people vaccinated overall in a shorter period of time. BC based its decision on the data from Quebec, the UK and Israel, which shows the first dose of vaccines is around 90% effective. BC's provincial health officer says the decision to delay second doses of COVID-19 vaccines by 4 months is also based on scientific evidence combined with data from the province's immunization campaign that began last December.
The effect that we're getting, the benefit and the protection from a single dose after about 3 weeks is upwards of 90%, and that lasts for a long time, at least for several months. So that is the type of information that we need to make those important decisions about what is the best way to maximize benefit.
Meanwhile, federal officials say they are not offering conflicting advice on who should receive the newly approved Oxford AstraZeneca COVID-19 vaccine. While Health Canada has authorized it for all adults, the National Advisory Committee on Immunization says it should not be given to people 65 or older. Officials with Health Canada say while it's preferable to give seniors the Pfizer or Moderna vaccines, seniors should not wait if they can get the AstraZeneca shot a lot sooner. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says extra vaccine shipments could make it possible to vaccinate all willing Canadian adults before September.
We are working extremely hard every single day to get as many doses to Canadians as possible, as quickly as possible. And as I've been saying since past November, we expect all Canadians to be vaccinated by the end of September for those who want it. We are seeing, however, an increase in the number of vaccines coming into Canada, as we had hoped for. It's possible that those timelines be moved forward, and we're certainly going to work closely with the provinces in order to try and get to that, to get vaccinations to Canadians as quickly as possible so that we can loosen and reopen as quickly as possible.
It appears as though many regions of the United States are reopening their economies a lot faster than Canada. Political reporter Brian Lilley says even though Alberta Premier Jason Kenney announced a gradual Stage 2 reopening, he's receiving a lot of backlash because it's simply not enough.
I know that your Premier Jason Kenney is facing the same kind of backlash every time he tries to loosen restrictions slightly. Look, Texas just announced that they are wide open as of this week. 100% of businesses can open, and the mask mandate is ending. Mississippi following suit. New York State has had indoor dining for restaurants since Valentine's Day. Chicago, since late January, has allowed indoor dining, and each of those states has, or locations, has increased the capacity limit.
Mr. Lilley will also give us an update as to if he believes we'll have a federal spring election. That Q&A is coming up in the second half of our program. An Alberta MLA is hoping to wrangle up support to make rodeo our province's official sport. Mohammed Yassin, a UCP member for Calgary North, introduced the private members bill on Tuesday. He says rodeo is an important thread in the rich cultural fabric of Alberta. Some political pundits are questioning the timing of the proposal after the release of a deficit budget and during the pandemic. Many legal firearms owners are not happy with Ottawa proposing legislation which would allow municipalities to implement bylaws banning guns. Now, you can include Rick Blakely in that group. Mr. Blakely is with Alberta Fish and Game here in Lethbridge. He says the changes to these laws will have no impact on violent gun crime and, if anything, will make legal firearm owners the scapegoats.
The guns that aren't stored properly are the guns in the belt of the violent person who is using a firearm for violent intent. They haven't followed the rules, and the government will never, ever, until they start prosecuting them, get them to comply with the rules. We're the scapegoats.
Mr. Blakely will also discuss why he believes the Liberals reducing minimum sentencing for firearms offences is a big mistake. That interview is coming up after Business News. The Lethbridge Public Library will be putting on a Zoom webinar on March 9th for anyone who has questions about running for office in this fall's municipal election. Sterling Mayor Trevor Lewington, who's also with Economic Development Lethbridge, says this is a great way to learn more about municipal government and what people might be getting into if they decide to run.
And what they'll learn is a little bit about campaigning. So we've got a couple of expert speakers to talk a little bit about what does a campaign look like, what should you say, what should you not say. A little bit of education about the Municipal Government Act, which is the overarching legislative framework that governs municipalities. It's important to understand what a councillor's powers are, for example, what you can and can't do. And then there's a couple of people like myself that are current elected officials or former elected officials that will talk a little bit about their experiences. And we really hope it to be very interactive. We want to answer people's questions.
In the last civic election, the library ran a similar program called Candidate 101, and it was sort of spearheaded by two of our managers. So when the next election came around here, we thought it'd be a great idea to run the program again.
Q&A panelists will also include current Medicine Hat City Councillor Julie Friesen and Lance Tailfeathers, who is a former Blood Tribe councillor. Andrea True Joy Fox was a former district principal and a teacher for over 10 years. Fox is now host of a popular podcast she started in the midst of a pandemic. The podcast is entitled Talk with a Fox, and it features local artists, authors, and anyone with an impactful story to tell.
Gordon Fox, as many of you may know him, and dad to me. I have met some really incredible people who have done some amazing things, and people that other people may not always know about or have heard their name before, but I know these people and I know they have incredible stories. And I started thinking, wouldn't it be great to talk to these people? Some of them I consider friends, mentors, because I know if other people heard their stories, they would be able to feel inspired and, just kind of spark something in them that maybe, they've been waiting to start that project or inspiration of what to do with their life. And I knew that when these stories were heard, that is what people would be able to feel. And so I had been thinking about doing a podcast. I started listening to podcasts actually when I was a principal. I had to do a lot of driving because you spend a lot of time in your car, and I love music, but I started to think, well, I want to be listening to things that help me expand my mindset and growth. So then I thought, hey, this is something that I think I would enjoy doing.
To follow Andrea on her podcast journey, you can visit talkswithafoxpodcast.buzzsprout.com. Students at St. Martha's Elementary School took part in an event which saw them learn and write notes of encouragement to those who are suffering from homelessness. The students underwent what's called a kindness workshop administered by the nonprofit group called Blankets of Hope.
Blankets of Hope is where we give homeless blankets to feel warm and loved, and we also tie cards to the blanket so they know that they're loved, and we also give them nice purple or gray blankets to keep them warm when it's really cold out.
The Blankets of Hope is an international initiative that started out of New York City, and the children of St. Martha was blessed to receive 200 free blankets this year. We have collaborated with Streets Alive Mission, where the students and the staff at Children of St. Martha will be writing encouraging messages of hope and love and praying over the blankets, and then collaborating with Streets Alive to give individuals who are accessing streets these blankets to stay warm. Children of St. Martha is a beautiful school which is very connected to the community while also showing the love, the Christ-like love that we have for others.
The blankets will be given to Streets Alive Mission here in Lethbridge. A local clothing store has experienced some growth during the COVID-19 lockdowns. The owner of Sayes Clothing is thrilled about opening a new store in downtown Lethbridge and being able to expand even during the pandemic.
I moved to a new location because I really want to expand my business, and I know that all my loyal customers will gonna support me, and I really very overwhelmed of all the support of my customers. And during this pandemic, that there's still a lot of people that keep supporting local, because I guess that they realize that we really need the support of the people to be able to work our business. My advice for other business owners is just pretty much to connect with your customers, because connecting with your customers, that's the one that makes them want to come and shop with you.
The Lethbridge and District Exhibition and Rotary Club of Lethbridge East presented two local winners with the Agriculture Scholarship Award. As Micah Quinn explains now, these two recipients were pleasantly surprised when they heard the news.
Brady Donkersgood and Aaron Lorenz each received a $10,000 Agriculture Scholarship Award. The award supports post-secondary students who study in the field of agriculture.
When I first learned that I was the recipient, I was for sure surprised by it. I was told throughout this process about the number of applicants, and I know that a lot of them are very well qualified. So I knew it was a difficult decision for the scholarship committee to make, to pick myself as the winner, and then also Aaron Lorenz, who is the other winner.
I was overwhelmed. It's a really big honor, and not only that, it gives you the confidence and the support to continue on your career.
Donkersgood is a third-year student at the University of Alberta, and he says that one of his goals later in life is to take over the family farm.
And to run our family farm is to continue using sustainable techniques and technology, but then to implement new ideas and new techniques as they continue to come out. with the goal of improving our output on our farm, but then also maintaining our land and our resources for the years to come.
Lorenz is an economics major at the University of Lethbridge with a minor in agricultural economics, and he's hoping to get into grad school in the near future.
And at the same time, it's kind of cool to see the cutting edge of research. So I've been a part of a few research projects with the Alberta sugar beet growers. I did some work, and then a little bit of my own in some classes too.
The two students will spend the scholarship money on rent and living expenses related to upcoming schooling, and they'll both have to present their budget findings to the Lethbridge and District Exhibition and Rotary Club of Lethbridge East in the near future. For Bridge City News, I'm Micah Quinn.
The town of Fort Macleod may be selling its historic courthouse soon. Built in 1902, the provincial and federal heritage landmark was listed for sale a couple of years ago at $225,000. Now, there's some recent interest on the property. The legendary courthouse has been featured in a couple of Hollywood films, including Fargo and Brokeback Mountain. The town says there's a buyer interested, and more details may be released next week. Saskatchewan Health Authority says 91% of long-term care residents have received at least their first dose of a COVID-19 vaccine. Officials say second doses have been given to long-term care residents in around 53% of the facilities. The Ministry of Health says it delivered around 80,000 doses across the province and expects it to receive another 15,000 doses of the newly approved AstraZeneca vaccine. It is not yet said if it will follow the advice of the National Committee that recommends AstraZeneca vaccine not to be used on those 65 years or older. As COVID-19 cases continue to come down in Manitoba, the province is further easing restrictions. As of Friday, people will be allowed to create 2 household bubbles and doubling the maximum capacity at stores and restaurants to 50%. But restaurant dining is still restricted to members of a single household. The opposition NDP says members of 2 households in a bubble should be allowed to dine out together. A man who killed 10 people and injured 16 others by deliberately driving a van down a Toronto sidewalk was found guilty on all 26 charges. Alec Manassian admitted to planning and carrying out the attack on April 23rd of 2018, but argued he should not have been found guilty because he's autistic.
Today, Her Honor found Mr. Doe guilty. She has determined that he is criminally responsible for his actions. The Crown will not be making any comments with respect to sentencing. That is another day, and we will make those submissions in court. Conducting this important trial remotely during a pandemic and providing access to the family, friends, and loved ones of the 26 victim families, to Mr. Doe's family, to the media, and to the public at large, while respecting anti-COVID measures that prevented large gatherings, was a significant challenge. It was a challenge all of us involved in this trial overcame by working together.
I'm grateful to the judge. I'm grateful to the prosecution. I'm grateful to Jeff and Maya for making all this happen. And I probably will sleep tonight for the first time in a while.
Well, we had double-digit temperatures in Lethbridge once again today, and the warm weather will be sticking around for a few more days. Full weather details are coming up. This is actually a very good time to wash your vehicle. No rain or snow in the forecast, and the weather's been nice and mild. Jeanette Rocher is here now with a full look at the weather picture. Jeanette, those double-digit temperatures will be sticking around just in time for the weekend?
Yeah, they will be held beginning tomorrow right through Saturday. We are going to be even seeing some teen temperatures, not just double digits. So look at these temperatures starting tomorrow here, 16 degrees. We're going to have to keep our eye on that too, because the record for that day, March 4th, is actually 16.8 degrees. That's the highest record. So we'll have to keep our eye on that for tomorrow to see if we break any records. After that, we're going to be looking at a high of 17 degrees on Friday. The record for that was actually 20 degrees. So we'll have to get a little bit higher than that to break any records. 13 degrees was our high, is our high expected on Saturday, 10 degrees for Sunday. Look at all the sunshine too right through the week. 8 degrees for Monday and a high of 3 degrees with a mix of rain and possibly some flurries for next Tuesday. But looking at these temperatures, definitely feels like spring. In fact, parts of southern Alberta were the hot spots in Canada earlier today for at least part of the day. I know Barnwell, Grassy Lake, those areas got up to around 12 degrees. 4 is the average high for this time of year, -9 the average low. 19 degrees was our high temperature back in 1986, and in 1978 it was a chilly -33. Sun rose this morning at 7:10. sunset this evening right at 6:16 p.m. So look at that, just a little more than 11 hours of daylight. Let's take a look at what's happening across the rest of the country into tomorrow. Showers expected for the west coast. Victoria sitting at 11 and even 10 degrees for Vancouver tomorrow as showers develop into the late afternoon tomorrow. Lots of sunshine across Alberta tomorrow. Calgary's high 11, 6 degrees in Edmonton, and not so much with the wind either, only about 15 kilometers per hour. So certainly we can live with that. Now in the rest of the prairies, we're looking at a high of 2 degrees in Saskatoon, 6 in Regina, and a high of 3 degrees in Winnipeg with sunshine. They are developing some fog patches overnight that will be dissipating into the morning and then clearing up to give it a nice sunny day in Winnipeg tomorrow. -1 the high in Toronto, -7 Ottawa, -6 in Montreal. These areas all expecting to be a bit windy tomorrow as well, including about 50 kilometers per hour winds to 40 in the Toronto and Montreal areas. Fredericton also experiencing the wind tomorrow, 50 kilometers per hour, -2 the high there, lots of sunshine, 3 degrees in Halifax under sunny skies. Charlottetown expecting some flurries tomorrow, -1 is the high, 0 expected to be the high tomorrow in St. John's, Newfoundland. They are under a snow squall warning into today and into tonight. Tomorrow still getting 60% chance of flurries and a 60K wind as well. So there you have it. That is your forecast.
Sky Regional is the first Canadian airline to announce it's clipping its wings as the pandemic takes a heavy toll on the aviation industry. The airline says it will shut down at the end of March after Air Canada moved to consolidate all regional service under Jazz Aviation. Now, as part of the move, Air Canada is ending its business agreement with Sky Regional to operate flights along regional routes in both Canada and the United States under the Air Canada Express brand. Sky Regional says its 25 aircraft will be transferred to Air Canada and the pilots will be transferred to Jazz Aviation. Canadian auto sales were down close to 10% from a year earlier as much of the country remained in various degrees of lockdowns during the pandemic. Estimates compiled by DeRosier Automotive Consultants shows auto sales total 112,654 units last month. The agency says lingering public health restrictions combined with a shortage of microchips led to a drop in light vehicle sales. Light trucks accounted for 83.5% of the market share compared with 78.9% from a year ago as buyers continue to move away from cars. The founder and CEO of Good Earth Cafe says the Calgary-based chain could double its 45 locations across Canada through a program to take over coffee shops being closed down by chains such as Starbucks. Michael Going of Good Earth says his company is already looking at potential sites to be redeveloped and is recruiting partners for multi-unit franchises. The chain says it aims to offer ethically sourced coffee and fresh food while promoting community interaction and environmental responsibility. A federal judge in the United States has ordered ExxonMobil to pay a $14.25 million civil penalty in a lawsuit accusing the company of violating the Clean Air Act for 8 years at its refinery in Texas. The decision reduces a previous award of almost $20 million, which was overturned by the 5th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals. The group Environment Texas initially sued the company back in 2010. Now, here's a look at today's markets. The TSX was down 100 points in the day to finish at 18,321. The Dow was down 121 points to 31,270. The S&P 500 was down 50 points to 3820, and the Nasdaq was down 361 points in the day to finish at 12,998. West Texas Intermediate Oil was up $1.24 to $60.99 US per barrel. Natural gas was down 3 cents to $2.81 US. Gold was up 9 cents to $17.1132 US an ounce, and silver was even on the day at $26.10 US an ounce. Wheat is at $308 per metric ton, barley's at $310, canola's at $7.58, and corn is at $342 per metric ton. Live cattle were down 3 cents to $119.40. Feeder cattle were up 48 cents to $137, and lean hogs were up $2.58 to $87.93. The Canadian dollar was even over the past 24 hours at 79.02 US. Recapping one of our top stories this hour, the Alberta government announced more funding for specialized health care for seniors today. Premier Jason Kenney announced a $200 million funding boost to continuing care for seniors for a total of $3.5 billion. Premier Kenney is also receiving some backlash for not opening more of the Alberta economy. Political reporter Brian Lilly will have details for us in just a moment. COVID-19 vaccines are back in the news once again, and the timetable of administering the doses. To talk more about this in detail is Toronto Sun columnist Brian Lilly, joining me once again from Ontario. Brian, both BC and Alberta say they'll move the time between doses from a 3 to 4 week interval to a 16-week interval. Why the change, and is there any real science to back this up?
Well, there's an argument about whether the science is there to back it up, but Dr. Bonnie Henry, BC's provincial medical officer, came out on Monday saying, look, we need to do this so that we can get more people vaccinated, that there is a miraculous amount of coverage with just one shot. And if we do this, then every adult that wants a shot in British Columbia can get one by sometime in July. And especially with more vaccines coming on, Johnson & Johnson probably in the next few weeks, we'll talk about AstraZeneca in a moment, then maybe even by Canada Day, every adult could be in British Columbia could be vaccinated. Well, Alberta Health Minister Tyler Shandro, he took a look at this and he said, yep, we are interested as well. Ontario is saying we're going in this direction. So, and Saskatchewan as well. So I think what essentially is happening though, and I hate to put it this way, Hal, is it is in some ways the equivalent of people cutting their pills in half because they don't have enough money for their medication. The only reason that they're doing this is that we don't have enough doses. This came at the same time as the United States was saying, every American that wants a vaccine, we're going to have one for you by May. And we're saying if we go down to just one dose, we can get this done by July, with the rest of the doses, your second dose, your follow-up dose, being done between then and the end of September. So it wouldn't change the overall timeline, but it would give us some level of protection for the majority of the adult population by summer.
So AstraZeneca doses, or the Indian-made version of it known as Covishield, are now in Canada, but you've discovered some odd things about these doses. Can you share?
A couple of things. One, where they came from, how we got them. They came from a place called the Serum Institute of India. Now, this is a massive vaccine manufacturing facility in India, and India is one of the world's leading vaccine manufacturing facilities. But this particular assembly line or manufacturing line, production line to put vaccines into bottles was set up with hundreds of millions of donor dollars from governments around the world, from places like the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, in order to supply low-cost doses to low and middle-income countries. Canada is not a low and middle-income country, so we approved AstraZeneca, but at the same time approved Covishield. Health Canada treats them as two distinct vaccines, even though they describe it as the same recipe made in two different kitchens. We are essentially, as one person put it to me this week, one longtime health bureaucrat now working at the international level, they said, this move makes Canada a vaccine pirate. And now the latest information that we found out about these doses kind of adds to that. We may have intercepted them on the high seas. These might be the doses that were meant for South Africa that country rejected and said, we're sending back the ones you've given us, and that 500,000 dose order that we had for you, we don't want it anymore. 300,000 or 60% of the doses that we got this week, Hal, they have an April 2nd expiry date. This is like buying milk just before it goes bad. Now, the good news is the provinces tell me, yes, we can get into arms, but there's going to be a big back and forth because there's a fight over who should get this AstraZeneca vaccine and who shouldn't. What age group is it appropriate for, and so on.
Yeah, there's some debate about if the vaccine is safe for people over the age of 65. What are the health experts saying?
Well, look, I think it is. I'm not a doctor and I don't play one on TV, but I think it is safe for people over 65. The National Vaccine Council, National Committee on Immunization, they came out and said there's not enough evidence of people over the age 65 being in the clinical trials to say that it's effective for them. They didn't say it's not effective for people over the age of 65. They said there were not enough people over the age of 65 in the initial clinical trials. But this vaccine has been used since the end of December across Great Britain. It's been used in India. It's been used in Mexico, Dominican Republic, elsewhere, with great success. And to give you an idea, The government in Scotland commissioned a study, and they have mostly been using AstraZeneca for people over the age of 65. People like my Uncle Joe, my Aunt Margaret, my Uncle Frank, they've all been getting this dose. After 4 weeks of a single shot dose, so this is without the follow-up booster shot, hospitalizations in those over 65 went down by 94%, deaths by 100%. That's what I'm looking for in a vaccine. Stops you from dying. Make sure that most people are not going to end up in hospital. I would say that the real world data trumps any worries that people have about the clinical trial data.
Brian, Alberta slowly entered phase 2 of reopening its economy. How's your Tai Chi and your Pilates? Pretty good? You can join me up there.
I don't know what those are. Nothing is open in Toronto at this point.
You know, it's been slow in many provinces across Canada. The economic impact has been devastating to so many small and medium-sized businesses. I talk to business owners all the time. Many of them are probably going to close their doors because they just can't afford to remain closed, like closed permanently. Recent stats say this could be the worst economic year on record since 1961.
1961 is the year that Stats Canada started collecting data in the form that they do. So it's the worst year on record, you know, since they started using the same set of statistics. And the economy shrank by 5.4% of GDP last year. That is a staggering amount. Of course, you know, many of the businesses hurt hardest are, well, those that employ people who are on the margins. We're talking about hotel workers, restaurant workers, retail, small businesses. These are the places that have been hit hardest. Your local gym where you would go and take Pilates class, for example. You know, your big banks, they're doing fine. Trucking companies, they're mostly doing fine. Amazon, if you work at an Amazon warehouse, they're doing great. Loblaws, Safeway, Sobeys, they're all fine. But it's the small and medium-sized businesses that are hurting. And I know that your Premier, Jason Kenney, is facing the same kind of backlash every time he tries to loosen restrictions slightly. Look, Texas just announced that they are wide open as of this week. 100% of businesses can open, and the mask mandate is ending. Mississippi following suit. New York State has had indoor dining for restaurants since Valentine's Day. Chicago, since late January, has allowed indoor dining, and each of those states has, or locations, has increased the capacity limit. So I think it started with 25%. It may be up to 50% in the Chicago area now. The United States is starting to open up. That's partly because they're well ahead of us in terms of vaccine. They're over 20%. We're at about 4% of the population with a single shot. But also their politicians saying, yes, there is the health impact, but there's also the economic impact, and we can't ignore that.
Well, and health impact as well, with a lot of the business shutting down, that creates a lot of depression, anxiety, and suicide rates going through the roof. We've talked about experts about that specifically in our show here. Now, Brian, are you still of the opinion that the Trudeau Liberals are looking for an election this spring despite the lockdowns and vaccine rollout problems?
Yes, I really am. And, you know, even more information coming out over the last week or so would lead me to that. One, the AstraZeneca doses arriving miraculously. You know, we agreed to purchase 20 million AstraZeneca doses. You'll notice that they're not on a delivery schedule anytime soon because they're coming from the United States where they won't release the vaccine. So we miraculously find these ones from India that have an expiry date. We're going to get them into people's arms. They're going to hope that the death rate goes down, that the hospitalization rate goes down. They're going to bring in a big budget, and they're already putting out signals. The Liberals complaining in a Canadian press story that was out over the weekend, maybe you saw it, that, oh, those mean Conservatives are blocking our legislative agenda. We can't pass bills because we're in a minority. Let me say that is baloney. Absolute, or to use the Joe Biden term, it's malarkey. This is simply not true. Even in a minority government, the governing party controls the legislative agenda. The most the Conservatives can do is, you know, push for a debate that lasts a few hours.
Well, aren't the NDP also propping them up at the same time?
They are, and none of the demands by the opposition parties are, you know, forcing the government to delay legislation by months or even weeks. We're talking a few hours on a Thursday for a debate on an issue that they feel is important for the country. So the Liberals are trying to set it up so that if those numbers, if those COVID numbers that I described to you do fall, that they are ready to go, and look for, election day to be June 7th or 14th.
Are the Conservatives ready to go? They've said in the past that they've, had a lot of money in their coffers thanks to their donors, but are they really ready at this point?
I'm not sure. They've got their convention coming up. There is an attempt by a lot of people aligned with Derek Sloan to try and use the convention to take over the party that threw him out. We'll see if they're successful in that. If they are, expect the Liberals to use that to their advantage. I think Aaron O'Toole will be able to, push back against that, though. And, but he has to get a narrative ready that he's ready, and to show that he's got a handle on what's going on in this country when it comes to how the government is failing us on COVID-19. Again, yes, we might end up having all of us get at least one shot by July, but not because of any actions by the Trudeau government. They have continued to fail us, but because doctors and scientists found a way for us to, effectively cut our pills in half. He's got to be able to capitalize on the failures of this government in the pandemic in order to turn things around. But it will be tough against a very big spending budget.
Brian, We Charity is back in the news once again. An American journalist and former prominent donor is calling for a full-scale police investigation. Meanwhile, other charities are really worrying about the trust fallout.
Yeah, this is not the first time that I've heard from charities that they worry that what's going on with We is going to hurt them. There's a company called Proof. They do a lot of public relations, public affairs, government relations work. And they did a tracking study on this a couple of months ago and found that trust in charities was down significantly due to the We Charity scandal. So this is bad news all around for the sector. But, my heart breaks for this man, Reid Cowan, who appeared before the Commons Committee last week looking into We and described what happened. He became involved after his 4-year-old son died. He fell at a play park and died as a result of injuries in that. And to help him cope with the loss of his son, he decided he was going to give him a legacy and help build schools in Africa. Everything that's come out about We, and by the way, he went to some of the biggest school districts in America. He spoke, he bundled money, he raised money. They told him that his work, his documentaries brought in some of the big American powerhouse corporations to fund We in the United States. And he has been beside himself finding out what has gone on and that the charity isn't quite what he said. And he described how outraged he was at an article that said staff used to joke that the name plaques that went on schools should go on with Velcro because they changed them so often. He found a video showing that the school his son, one of the schools named after his son, had been named, they'd had naming ceremonies with other high-profile donors, and the videos were online. He wants a full-scale police investigation in the United States and in Canada into how this organization has conducted itself.
Brian, there's a global battle over the future of journalism with media outlets here in Canada. They're saying tech giants like Google and Facebook need to pay up. Now, many newspapers have been struggling in our country, including your newspaper, with a lack of revenue. Now, Brian, your rival, the Toronto Star, has come up with a unique and creative way to raise funds. Tell me a bit about that.
It's kind of like going back to how opera was funded back in past centuries. Opera houses used to be funded by the casinos outside that would give them enough money to be able to put on the beautiful Italian operas that we still know and love to this day. And in some ways, there's a lot of schools and hospitals and other infrastructure across our respective provinces funded by the lottery. So the Toronto Star says they're going to launch an online gaming app. It's an interesting way for them to fund their journalism, but they say, look, we want to keep doing what we're doing. We can't do it the way it is. I'll get to Google and Facebook in a moment, but it's a new way. Now, a lot of people may not realize this, but for years, the Toronto Star was actually funded by those naughty novels that your granny used to read that would be purchased at the supermarket checkout line, the Harlequin romance novels. Wow. Torstar owned Harlequin romance globally, and it was the cash cow for them. It made more money for them than the newspaper did, and it funded a lot of good journalism. I'll say that even though they're my competitors. So in a way, this is just a kind of a return to that. As far as the Google Facebook fight, there's an ongoing discussion about whether the Trudeau government's going to step in and make the tech giant start paying. For example, if you read a story of mine that I wrote that my employers paid for on your Google News app, there's a chance that you never end up on a site owned by my employer that gives them the revenue, the ad revenue from that, from you viewing it. That money goes to Google, and the news publishers say, wait a minute, this doesn't work out quite the way it should, and you're not sharing. So a big fight going on. They're almost at a deal in Australia with both tech giants. France is legislating. We'll see what Canada does in the coming weeks.
Yeah, we'll keep our eye on that, definitely. One of our regular contributors, Brian Lilly, joining me once again from Toronto. Thanks, Brian.
Thank you, Hal.
The federal Liberals have tabled Bill C-21 with new legislation to amend our current gun laws. Gun control advocates say it doesn't go far enough and that the Prime Minister did not keep his promises. Now, on the other hand, gun owners say it unfairly targets them, including farmers, hunters, and sport shooters. Today's guest is Rick Blakely, president of the Lethbridge Fish and Game Association and the Lethbridge Shooting Sport Facility. Rick, welcome to Bridge City News.
How do you do? Good to meet you.
Now, first of all, tell me a bit about the Lethbridge Shooting Sport Facility. What kind of people are part of the club and what age ranges? Is it for everyone?
Well, actually it is. We've got a very diverse membership. Over 2,000 women and men and children, of which the adults are members. The children, we provide the facility for free for children who are accompanied by their parents or a guardian. So it's a really diverse group. We don't refuse membership to anyone, and we have way too much fun.
Now, Rick, one concern I keep hearing is that very little of the new gun legislation focuses on criminal misuse of firearms. Instead, it really singles out the legal gun owners who've been vetted by the RCMP, including sport shooters, hunters, farmers, and ranchers. What are your thoughts?
Well, you're absolutely right. And earlier you said the people who are wanting controls over guns feel that they're disappointed in Liberal government. Many of our members voted Liberal because they said that they would put in regulations that respected hunters, firearm owners, and farmers. So we feel that they've definitely went against our what we thought they were all about. This new law doesn't really change much. The current laws are very strict. As a matter of fact, we talk about hockey or football or something like that. If a person who owns a firearm is engaged in a hockey game and gets a little hot under the collar and fights, they can have their firearm license taken away because they have shown violent behavior. It's no different than their new red and yellow and I forget what colors they are, but the flags, they're using the terminology used in the United States, and it's already in place in Canada. Right now, I can get my firearms and my ability to own firearms taken away.
Now, Rick, as a gun owner yourself, are you tired of being the target of this kind of legislation? Pardon the pun, by the way. And how much of this new gun legislation is actually new?
Well, like I said, it really is a reiteration of a lot of the things that are currently in the law. The only addition is there's a whole bunch of firearms that are on the new prohibited list, firearms that were purchased and registered and looked after in safes, in vaults, and taken to the range for shooting sports activities. So those guns represent about 900,000 guns that the government's currently talking about confiscating through a buyback program, which is basically a program of telling you what they'll pay you for a gun and you got to take it. So I think that's illegal right now.
If most of the gun crime is coming from gangs in the big cities, will this kind of legislation actually fix anything? Or is it maybe better to focus on stopping the illegal guns from crossing the border?
Absolutely. Illegal guns, I mean, it's really interesting how perceptions are. Most of the illegal guns come from across the border or are actually built by the criminals. And so these guns that we have are stored in vaults. They don't, very seldom are they ever involved in a crime. So violent people use firearms for violent intent. Of the murders since 1980, 116 murders were committed by violent people who had registered firearms, 116 people since 1980. That's over 40 years.
So Rick, why were certain rifles banned? Rifles like the AR-15 are labeled as assault weapons, which are only meant to be used on the battlefield by the military. But is that actually the case, or are they genuinely a sport shooting or hunting rifle?
They were designed by the shooting sports people who shot in sports where you had to be very nimble and very accurate. And so they designed a firearm that was ergonomically fitting them, and it was light and it was nimble and it was easy to use. The military took that design, didn't use the semi-automatic, which is a pull of the trigger, shoots a bullet. They made it into a fully automatic machine gun that looked and felt exactly like the sporting gun, because they needed a rifle that would be nimble in Vietnam, where it was jungle warfare.
Rick, the new legislation allows cities to ban handguns by means of restricting their storage and their transportation. Do you see this as really a good idea, or is there maybe potential concerns here?
It's good that you mentioned that, because firearms currently that we own and are in our vaults and safes are in a very safe position. It's illegal for us to store a firearm unlocked or out in the open. So they're all in vaults and safes anyway. Central storage won't change that. The guns that aren't stored properly are the guns in the belt of the violent person who is using a firearm for violent intent. They haven't followed the rules, and the government will never, ever, until they start prosecuting them, get them to comply with the rules. We're the scapegoats. The criminals, it's really interesting. The current government has made the minimum sentences for firearm use of a firearm in the commission of a crime. They've taken the minimum sentences out of those offenses and drug offenses. It really makes me wonder who is the priority here. It seems like they are looking after the criminal and definitely impacting the safety of every citizen.
Now, Rick, another issue is that municipalities are normally under provincial jurisdiction. So do the feds actually have the constitutional right to do this? I understand that the province might actually challenge this.
Well, you're absolutely right. The federal government is, in this case, stepping all over municipalities and provinces. And it is, from my understanding, provincial regulation to it's provincial regulations, and they didn't even consult with the provinces. So this is going to be another issue of poorly thought out firearm policies.
Now, the legislation has a voluntary buyback program for the banned guns, but gun owners don't have to sell their guns to the government as long as they don't shoot them or sell them and they keep them locked up. Now, this obviously has infuriated a lot of gun control advocates, and this does raise some interesting questions. If these weapons really are dangerous, why would you not follow through and make it mandatory with a buyback program?
Well, first I have to correct you in your term weapons. That's the propaganda from the government. They're calling them weapons, which are typically used for killing people. Our firearms are used for shooting targets, and And there's a very clear distinction between the intent of the person using both of those tools. I don't see it as being a legitimate activity. If you were to tell me that I had to sell you my car for $100, I'm sure there would be a case for a charge. It's illegal for you to tell me what you're going to pay me for an object, and so the government is really going outside of personal property rights. What's next? Do they take all the gasoline cars and say, we're going to have a buyback program? They never owned the car, but they'll give you $1,000 for it.
And then we'll go back to horse and buggy. There you go.
Yeah, right.
It may not work in the wintertime quite as well, though. Now, Rick, are you hearing any feedback from local area gun store owners on this? Because if they already have some of these banned guns as part of their inventory, it would only seem fair that the government buy all of them back.
Well, it's really interesting. That's a really interesting part. The government's telling business owners to send them back. Interesting fact that this new bill, Bill 21, did add airsoft guns, BB guns, and paintball guns to the number of guns that are even toy guns to the prohibited firearms in the act, which is pretty ludicrous. And there's a number of companies that, I mean, there's thousands of jobs on the line as far as firearm stores. But in the past, they have shifted to hunting to other firearms that are not prohibited. It's going to cost millions. And Bill, let's just be real frank. It's going to be $1 billion problem, maybe even more.
Wow. Now, another concern is that Bill C-21's red flag and yellow flag legislation would apparently allow police to enter the home of a gun owner without a warrant after receiving a complaint. Can you explain how that works?
Well, there's another case where firearm owners are treated differently than criminals. Currently, it's illegal for me not to update my address and location. A while ago, the Conservative Party tried to put through a bill that would maintain the addresses of people who had been charged with violent crimes. That bill failed. The Liberals and the NDP didn't want that in. So right now, under the current legislation, they can enter my home. They can search it, check to make sure that my firearms are properly stored in a vault. They can talk to anyone they want as far as my mental capacity, and anyone can report me for as a firearm owner, a licensed firearm owner, a respectful, responsible firearm owner. They can report me if I do any violent act, even if I'm engaged in a hockey game or a football game or a soccer game. If I get upset and start hitting somebody, that's a violent act, and I can lose my guns and my privilege to own firearms.
So, Rick, any final thoughts as to where this is going and how concerned Canadians and law-abiding gun owners should respond?
I don't know where they're going with this. I would expect that they're wanting to eliminate all firearms. They definitely are trying to follow the example of New Zealand. New Zealand's a small island. It's very isolated. It doesn't have a United States on its border. And so it's very easy for them to control firearms. However, I understand that illegal firearms is still a problem in New Zealand. So where is this going? I think there's a utopian belief that if there are no firearms, there will be no wars and there will be no violence. But really, firearms are, it's a wonderful sport. It's an Olympic sport. And I have taught children how to use firearms, and children, we offer programs for children who can't afford any other of the sports because we offer them for free. And I have had children who have problems for their parents. And once they start using firearms and start enjoying the sports, they understood what responsibility was. They understood that they were being responsible for a potential danger to others, and they have different opinions about violent video games now. So I think it's wonderful that the government of the past used to encourage children to take up the shooting sports. I think that was a very good activity to teach responsibility and respect for others.
Well,
and
I
we
remember,
try and maintain
my
that.
father had an acreage out by Bowden, Alberta, and I was a kid back in the 70s. And
Yep.
I started out on a pellet gun to a 22, and then he handed me a 12-gauge shotgun, showed me how to put the stock into my shoulder, says, "Go ahead, son, let it go." So I did some target shooting, and I landed 12 feet behind me on my butt right after that. So I'll never forget that.
Same
when I was
experience,
a kid.
only my dad lined me up with a slough.
Thank you so much for your time today, Rick. Rick Blakely is the
Yeah.
president of the Lethbridge Fish and Game Association. Thanks again.
Thank you very much.
On behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News, I'm Hal Roberts. God bless, and thanks for watching.